Hello and welcome to Everyday Diary. And today's episode is a very special for me. It's a moment I will remember for a very, very long time because today I get to speak with someone who has shaped the way I think, write, and feel about spiritual care. And I guess many other fans also feel the same. I never had the privilege to talk to John Allett or David Cardas, but in our time, if there's someone who carries that spirit of seeing beyond the scorecard, of painting cricket in words, and telling stories that make you pause and reflect, it's the Jarrod Kimber.
Oh, thank you very much.
He's not just a writer, filmmaker, analyst, and podcaster. To me, he's a storyteller, the one who turned numbers into emotions and made cricket feel not just seen, but felt deeply personal. And I know many people might must have said similar things to you over the years, Jarrod, but I have been a fan since the days of cricket with balls, that insect.
You don't look that old.
Sorry?
You don't look that old.
No, that's my age.
I don't know. You look like you're 28, but obviously you're a lot older than 28 if you're reading cricket with balls.
My age is exactly as same as Ben Stokes.
Oh, okay. So you must have been reading cricket with balls when you were very young then.
Yeah. So I've fallen in love with cricket since I was 2.5 years old, actually. So it's a pretty long story. Yeah. So I remember your one book came in 2008. It's called, if I remember the name correctly, The Year of the Bonds something.
Yep.
When you have documented in diary kind of first gen, second gen, third gen, all in date. And the foreword is written by, if I remember correctly, Gideon Hay.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And he had mentioned that I think if you really love Jarrod Block, then buy this book. So one day you can say, oh guys, you just found out about cricket because now I am reading it for ages. And it stuck with me. So yeah, thanks again, Jarrod, for accepting this invitation. And it's honor for me to have you here.
No worries. Thanks for having me on.
So before we start proceeding, I've told you that I'm starting this series to discuss about some, I won't use word underrated, but yeah, some less talked legends, which I think should get more limelight for our current generation. Before that, I just had this in my mind that how you fall in love with this cricket and who's your favorite cricketer when you're going on.
I didn't really fall in love with cricket. I just grew up in a cricket family and assumed everyone in the world was playing and watching cricket. It's only later that I found out that wasn't the case. When I was a kid, I suppose my first favorite cricketer was probably Dean Jones. And then it was a bunch of Victorians, Dean Jones, Matthew Elliott, Craig Howard, Ian Harvey. You know, there was heaps of them. Obviously Shane Warne was a very big deal in Victoria as well. So yeah, there was a bunch of them. But yeah, I just grew up in a cricket family. So it was years later when I realized that that was not a normal thing.
Yeah, and that's a very grateful thing for us. I have very fond love for all-rounders, actually. And since South African all-rounders always fascinated me. Well, this is a country which keep churning out such talents. And what I have noticed, people usually start this conversation from, 90s, they have many kind of like Pollock, Grosvenor, Cronje, Macmillan and all. But some people still go some years back and include Clive Dyce, Proctor. But even before that, they keep churning such players. So before I will hand over to you at one such player was Trevor Goddard. Really fascinated me, and what I have read about him and heard about him, that he was kind of father figure for in that era for South African cricket. And I just and I mean, this is a very common thing. Many people must have known that he was the record of the least economical bowler in the history of cricket. I think 1.64 is economy, and he used to open the back and open the bowling both, the left armor. Not in all the games, but at least few games he has opens. I think at one occasion
he opened I think he was batting all the time, didn't he? And he didn't often open the bowling, but he did it.
Correct. He opened the batting all the time. Yeah. And I think when they got their memorable victory in Leeds, he bowled I guess 60 odd overs unchanged.
Yeah.
Yeah, 60 overs and at 35-37 maiden. And I was just searching out that he made his debut in 1955, and till 67, in 12-year period, only he and Gary Sobert was two players who has more than 75 wickets and 2000 runs.
Yeah.
And he actually took more than 100 wickets, 140 wickets.
Yeah, and he was probably a batter, I say, is if you look at his overall record,
Yes.
I'd say he was probably a first-class batter and a first-class bowler rather than a test bowler, if that makes sense. So but as you said, because he was so economical, it was like it kind of still worked. And I think maybe I don't even know. I don't think we have a modern version of someone like Goddard. He's probably maybe the best way to look at it would be like Colin de Grandhomme's bowling or Jacob Orham's bowling, like as in a really defensive bowler. I think that's probably being a little bit unfair on him. I think he's maybe a slight step up on those guys as a bowler. But yeah, no one's idea of like a specialist bowler. Like I think even the way that South Africa always thought about him was like he was the fourth or fifth bowler in that area. But they just knew that no one was going to score for him. So he ends up with a great bowling average, despite the fact that he doesn't actually take that many, like his strike rate is a wicket every 95 balls.
95, yeah. And what is more
That's what you would expect from a finger spinner.
Yes. And what is more in that, despite of not being so strike heavy bowler, it's still he was the highest wicket taker of South Africa during his career and highest run getter, and by far he has taken the most catches as well.
Yeah, it's a really long career, isn't it? It's not something that was short. He was around for a very, very long time. And so, and he was multi-skilled. So you can imagine, I suppose, was it Sanas Jayasuriya retired with, probably second or third most runs and second or third most wickets? So again, it's not like we haven't had players like this, but Trevor Goddard really is a player from another era. It's not something that we genuinely see these days, is it? Like it's a very different kind of situation. And you look at some of the spells that he bowled. I think there's a game in Burqa where he bowls like 40 overs or something, and he goes at less than a run and over. It's ridiculous.
On average, he has bowled 48 overs per test.
Yeah, and I think they did have spinners, but if you go back, I think it's probably fair to say that he kind of plays as their spinner. I think that's kind of the role that he bowls. As you said, a couple of times he opens the bowling, but that's not really his thing. I would say that mostly he probably bowls, second change would be right? Maybe even third change on occasions. So, actually, no, I haven't looked. It's first and second change is probably it. So he comes on sort of after that, and then just, as you say, just bowls consistently for hours on end. Like that's what he does. Very slow. It's not that Colin de Grandhomme is probably, from modern cricket fans, the best one to understand, but a left arm version of Colin de Grandhomme, and there aren't many left arm bowlers, and there aren't many left arm medium pacers. Generally, the left armers we have are a little bit quicker. So he was very, very rare in his time.
And even in first class cricket, he has maintained the same kind of 20 odd average and 40 plus average in batting.
Yeah, I think in first class cricket, if you look at him, he was probably one of those players that you see a lot of in first class cricket, where he was good enough to hold the spot as a batter or as a bowler, which he probably isn't in Test cricket. Even though his numbers might hint that he is, he's probably not quite at that level. Whereas he's sort of one of those guys you see in county cricket all the time who has a big long career, and you're like, oh, they can't play Test cricket. But in his era, because no one could score off him, and it was a tough era for anyone to score, right? Like it was like the economy rates are so low in the 1950s, but he stood out amongst that lot, which I think is even more remarkable.
And not only he was an actual leader, very popular among his peers. And unfortunately, his career ended in a sad note. They have informed him that they are going to drop him in mid-series, even though after they have won the series. And I've read somewhere that in those days, he used to work somewhere, and his employer hasn't given him leave. So one guy from other state allowed him to, okay, now you can work for me as a part-time, and then you can play for South Africa.
Yeah.
These kind of things we miss when we do this era adjustment with only raw stats, but very crucial while judging the players.
No, it's a huge career. 15 years as an all-rounder who bowled as much as he did. I know it's not fast, but it's not spin either. Like he had to run in and hit the
Yeah.
crease. It's a really, really long career for an all-rounder. And I don't know, Imran Khan has done it as well. So I don't want to say that no other all-rounders who bowled seam have played that long, but generally they don't. Generally they fall apart, or you end up like Callis, where you just bowl fewer and fewer overs as your career goes on, right? That doesn't happen with him. I think, wasn't he going to be dropped from the last series? But actually what ends up happening is it's the last series of South African cricket anyway, like, because he's playing against Australia, isn't he? And they don't play another series after that. So, look, by that stage, the second half of his career, the first half of his career, they play a lot of test matches, right? Like,
Yep.
I mean, comparatively, by the end of his career, like, so he plays, where is it? Up until 1960, well, 55, 56, 57, 58, and 60, he plays test matches. And then he plays tests in 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, and then 70. So there's big gaps when you look at the test career of considering, as you said, he holds all these different records.
90% of his career played again, I think, only England and Australia.
Yeah, only the white teams. But over 15 years, he only plays 41 matches, right? It's not a great deal of matches. And as we said, there's 2 periods where he doesn't play at all for 3 or 4 years in there. So it's not at all, doesn't look at all like a modern test record.
This is one very crucial just popped up in mind, that usually when we consider longevity, so either we count it in terms of years and few people count it in terms of games. What do you think, what is the right parameter? Because some players like Tresco Thick, who's played 75 odd games in 5 years. And then we have example like this Trevor Goddard, who played 40 odd matches in 15 years.
So I always look at these. I think when we're comparing across eras, the best thing to do is always to look at years. Just because if you think about this from a South African point of view, they didn't have to get an opening batter or a part-time bowler or whatever, not a part-time bowler, but a fifth bowler or a fourth bowler for 15 years, right? Whereas if that's not the case with Trescothick, after 6 or 7 years, England have to find another opening batter, right? Like, it's a very different kind of situation when you look at it from that point of view. And so I would look at it from that point of view. That's not to say that we don't have more information on Trescothick's career, because I think that's also fair, right? Like, we can go deeper into his record. But yeah, when it comes down to it, most of the England players have played, even from the old days, play a lot of matches. And it's just not the case for any other country, right? Like, they just don't play as many games outside, in that situation. So yeah, I there's no hard and fast rule, but in the book, we used both. We looked at, we looked at number of runs, because you still have to make those runs, right? Like, it's all well and good to be like, oh, they played more matches. Yeah, but they did play more matches and they made those runs. And then we also looked at the amount of years that you played.
Yeah, since you mentioned about this book, Art of Batting, so I think it's still not yet. Yeah, I think it's still not yet available in India. Last I checked that.
Hard copy is in India. It just got released 2 days ago, I think. But the soft cover.
I have checked up Amazon, so it is showing that soft copy is available, but hard copy is available on 8th of July.
No, well, someone just bought the hard copy and told me about it. If you have a look and you tell me. Last I was told, the hard copy was available first and the soft copy. But by next week, I believe everything will be available anyway. But yes, just taking it time.
From last few months, I guess. So what's the main criteria?
So with the list, I think we started off, and I'd have to check our numbers, but I think we started off looking at only test batters who averaged over 44 with 2,000 runs or 3,000 runs. I can't remember which one we ended up going on.
4 or 14?
No, 44.
Why 44 specifically?
44 because 40 is a very low mark, and there are lots of players, especially from modern times, that it would have taken us too long to go through all the average players, right? And I didn't want to have to do that. We did go back and look at some of the players that were lower. But yeah, we did 44, and that didn't work for openers. So we changed that to 42 for openers, which gave us about an extra 15 or so players, which was very important.
Both and all.
Yeah. I think, there was a few players that needed, we wanted to make sure the 44 cutoff meant that, I can't remember what the percentage was, but the percentage of openers was really low in that list. when we opened the openers down to 42, it meant that it was about about a third of the batters were openers. And that's what we wanted. Right? That made sense, right? Like a third of the batters should be from the opening position. So, we did that. And then what we did afterwards was we then went and looked at individual cases of players that didn't pass either of those metrics. So obviously the guys before World War I, because their averages are quite low and they don't play a lot of games. And then also a lot of players from around World War II who don't play a lot of games because their career was cut short by that. Or they just played for a team like South Africa or New Zealand who didn't play a lot of test matches. And so we went through and we made individual lists from there on in.
So I'm expecting in future you will write similar book for bowling as well.
Sorry, you just cut out there. What was that?
No, I was saying that in future you will write similar kind of book for art of bowling.
Yeah, so we started planning the art of bowling, but we haven't actually written. We haven't got a deal yet. So obviously we're talking to Bloomsbury because they produce the art of batting, and so they get first right of refusal, I suppose, is the best way of putting it. But yeah, I mean, I'm a bowler, and I love bowling. There's no reason not to write it. It was more just, I don't even know if we had this conversation, but I know that I was thinking at the time that the batting book is easier just because there are certain things that it's very easy to compare a number 6 batter to an opening batter. You can do that mathematically. It is not very easy to compare a spinner to a seam bowler. And so it becomes a lot more confusing from that point of view, because if you think, if I'm comparing, let's say I'm comparing number 6s, I can look at people in the same matches who batted at number 5 and number 6, and I've got 3 other guys to compare them to straight away, right? And I could compare them to all the top order players in that game as well. When it's a spinner, sometimes you might be the only spinner in the match, right? So who have I got to compare you to in that match, right? So it's such a different skill that it was always a little bit trickier. I should say that the book is less about the list really than it is just batting in general. It's really a book about what makes great players, how we should judge them, how we should look at them, and
This is the point
and everything else.
also I was telling some of my friends that people usually just focus on, okay, who is on the list and what is the position of my favorite player, but they just don't want to go in the details about other things, that what makes that player to come on the number 3, number 4, number 5. That is, I think that is the main crux of the book.
Yeah. So I mean, that you're right. I wasn't that interested in the list.
Yeah.
Right. What I was interested in is how the players came into that
This is
section.
always subjective and it varies for anyone.
No, exactly. And if you read the book, I'm quite clear in saying that it's going to change. My list is going to change, right?
Yep.
This is not set in concrete. And in 5 years' time, I'll probably do it again, right? And I'll go back through everything and see if anyone needs to be added or taken out or moved around. But yeah, so it was really more about, this is why this person has a case to be in this position, right? And as you know, we did tiering and we did ranking, and so you might have a player like Gordon Greenwich, but you might say, well, they could go as high as like 29th, and I'm just making these numbers up because I can't remember, but they might go as low as 37th, right? So you could I think you can make a very good claim that you could have them 29th, and you could have a very good claim that they would be 37th. But I didn't want it to be like, again, that is didactic. That is the cases that we have made. And then because of what we believe to be the most important things, we're going to have him slightly higher in this range, right? So as you said, it's about looking at those sorts of things and kind of understanding it. And then through that, it really is, if you never read the list in the book at all, you wouldn't enjoy the book any less, because the book is really more about just batting and how great batting is, and who's been good at it and why they've been good at it, and great stories, great interviews with different players. The book is not really about the list. We toyed about taking the list out, but we kind of already advertised it, saying that it was going to have a list in it, and it would have been a bit weird and everything else. And also the list, a bit like what your podcast is, the list allowed us to talk about people who were overlooked in the rest of the writing of the book, right? There are players that I think are great that I didn't get to write about during the book just because there wasn't space or there wasn't time. But when you write about the list, you can include a couple of paragraphs to explain why this player was great.
So we just mentioned about that why it is difficult to judge bowling or in terms of batting. I will just try to make it more difficult for you because since my childhood, I am a fielding enthusiast. I fall in love with jaunty roads. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think fielding even the least statistically involved area in cricket. So if you were to design a fielding metric like see, even last 20 to 5 years, we have all kind of data, ball data, everything. But still we don't know that player A is faster than player B or player B is what is the arm speed of player C. Let's say a popular example of Glenn Phillips. Many YouTube reels already mold him like a very phenomenal fielder. But there are some people who have followed ball by ball cricket and what they know that he's proven to drop many step catches as well. Anil, I remember Martua once said that we should have one list or kind of tracking that number of missed catches. But still we haven't evolved beyond number of runouts or catches. And even I don't know whether we have this individual listing how many runouts has been done by one particular fielder. So how we can do better in this particular type of fielding?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if I'll ever do the 50 greatest Test cricketers of all time or the 50 greatest cricketers of all time. But if I was to do that list, you have to factor in fielding. But I think I would factor it in the same way we did strike rate with the book, which is we didn't worry about anyone who wasn't an outlier. If someone was an outlier in strike rate, especially fast scoring, then we brought that back in. We were less worried about outliers with slow scoring, but if you weren't a high scoring batter and you were also a bit slow, you were probably disadvantaged, right? So if you just look at the greatest cricketers of all time, I think you and I know that Colin Bland, right, is someone, or Bob Simpson. We know this, or Leary Constantine. We know this from the anecdotes. We don't. So if you're looking at trying to work out, as
still
a least you can put that in.
About Jim Ford, and he's a legend.
Yeah. Oh, Jim Ford's a different one. Well, that's for another day. But there's no doubt that I think we have the ability to go through that and mark those players up or down, right? We know that Sobers can field in every position. That's already a huge advantage in your cricket team, right? That someone who can field in every position. But what you're talking about is the next level of that, which is the sort of the current and the future. The best way to do it is very, very simple. It just costs money and no one wants to do it, which is you install spatial tracking cameras that don't just track the ball for Hawkeye, but track the entire ball on the field. And then let's say a ball is hit to mid-on and it is hit 20 meters to the right of mid-on. You or I are fielding there and it's 2. Kyron Pollard or David Warner's fielding there and it's 1, right? We know the velocity that it's hit, the distance that it's hit, how often that would be intercepted and it would go for 2 and how often it would go for 1. So let's say, I don't know, let's say you're an average fielder and that would go at 1.65 runs, right, per time. And you're a fielder who only ever allows it to go for 1, right? Well, we know that you're a plus fielder. You're 0.65 runs better than what we would expect in that position. We could do that with wicket keeping. We could do that with fielding. The issue is the technology. Well, sorry, no. The issue isn't the technology already exists. The issue is, yeah. So I talked to the BBL about this 7 years ago, and they were like, yeah, we're going to do it. No one's done it. I talked to the 100 about it, and they're like, yeah. I've talked to IPL owners, and they're like, yeah. No one wants to do it. I actually think that if I was a cricket team, let's say I ran an IPL franchise, right? I would put that system up at my home ground, so I knew my home ground better. I wouldn't tell anyone that I'd done it, but I'd bring in and I'd make sure that a bunch of domestic games were played there, so we got more and more data, so we could really work it out. And then I wouldn't tell anyone about it, right? Like I'd keep it to myself. As far as I'm aware, no team has done that yet, but it's ridiculous. Like we don't know. You and I can't sit here and say that MS Dhoni is a great wicketkeeper because we're not sure how many times that he didn't dive for balls that other wicketkeepers would have caught, right? And we don't know that. And it's silly because all that technology existed during MS Dhoni's career. I'm not talking about new technology. These technologies have existed and have been used in
baseball. They have OA, UZR, they have. But in cricket, and since there's a lot of T20s going on, and you know that a difference between a top fielder and average fielder is used in cricket and test.
Yeah. So, but if you look at it this way of like, one thing that we don't, I think CricViz might have it now, but it's still not widely known is who touches the ball the most, right? Who touches the ball the most in the field? Like, who is the person that is put into the positions that are most used? Because if you're a cricket team, like that was something that I couldn't do when I was doing my analysis, but I would have loved to have though. Are we putting the right fielders in the right place? Right? Like, knowing that sort of stuff, because it'd be terrible if like you come off at the end of the year and your best fielder has only fielded like 8% of the balls and they could have fielded 12% of the balls or 14% of the balls, right? So little things like that we need.
Data could help us to say that, okay, the Jaiswal is if not good, I'm just taking the not hitting. If whether he's good at in gully or at first swing or second swing. Data could help to determine.
Yeah, exactly. And, I don't know if you saw the podcast I did with Robbie the other day. We were talking about that of quite often what happens is you're a good slip fielder. I was a really good first and second slip fielder. I never quite understood third and fourth slip. Athletically, I could do it, but I wasn't quite in the same position. Whereas you put me at second slip or first slip, and I understood that because if you're a slip fielder, that's where you field all the time, right? You're at first and second. So it's all well and good to say Jaiswal's a good first slip fielder. Is he a good third and fourth slip fielder? Because that's where he's going to be in the cordon. It's a completely different role. And, these sorts of things are what we should know about cricketers coming out.
I read one article a few years back, I think on Aubrey Faulkner. And I have a very special place for him in my heart. With all his story, his tragic end and everything. But I just wanted to just talk something about him, how impactful his career in his era. And if we somehow, in future, I wanted to write a book on top 50 similar kind of players like Aubrey Faulkner, Trevor Goddard, or who deserve more limelight. So where I can place him.
Yeah, he's a fascinating cricketer because he starts off as a domestic batter who obviously has a lot of talent. And then it's really, he's propelled into the international team because he learns how to bowl the wrong and almost by accident, right? Like he was taught by a friend who was taught by a friend, and him and the other two friends of his and the guy who taught him all become South Africa's leg spinner. So they have 4 of them in the one side. And so he's learning this new art and he's not always consistently good at it, but because he's wrong in his, I don't know what your research tells you, but I think his was the hardest to pick.
I think England guys have objected him for the same, that he's the hardest to pick in first round.
Yeah, whereas I think, who doesn't take many test wickets, I think Gordon White only took a couple of test wickets. They could kind of see that Gordon White was falling over to bowl this weird ball. And the other guys, they could start to pick it. And as we now know, wrongans are slower. So batters pick that up subconsciously, right? The wrongman comes out of the top of the hand sometimes, little things like that. Even if they weren't picking it, whereas I think with Aubrey's case, it was probably more like the traditional one where it's slipping around. And so people weren't picking it. But then he's in test cricket as a bowler, but everyone who knows him knows he's a batter. And, we've seen situations like with Moeen Ali, right? Where someone's been picked out of their position and they never actually fully realize they're batting. And Aubrey Faulkner does. He goes the other way. He suddenly becomes a better batter than he even was a bowler, I would argue. I'm sure you could have your say there. And he starts becoming a great batter, especially at the point where people started working out his bowling a little bit more. And so if you look at his numbers, I think he's got great batting numbers against Australia or great bowling numbers against England, which is such a random thing to have happen. I think he gets the number 2 in the world if you look at the retrospective rankings and batting, and maybe about the same for bowling.
Yeah, if I'm not wrong, he was the first batter ever to score 700 runs in a series.
Yeah, was that when he made the double 100 in Australia?
Even before that, he had scored, I think, in one series, 540 odd runs and 29 wickets.
Yeah.
In the same series.
I think he just had a couple of periods where he just went ballistic. And look, he's got a really interesting life. His father was an alcoholic and he was kicked out of home early on.
Humans just went to the ground just to see him.
Yeah, he was incredibly attractive. So he was a young guy who left home early. I think he beat his dad up and left his house. And his parents were quite wealthy. So it was quite a big thing for him to leave his family. And ultimately, it's probably the reason he died early, because he never made any money throughout the rest of his life. And he lived he was around a lot of rich people, but he was never rich himself again. And he leaves home, he goes off, and I think he was on the on horseback in the Boer War. So he was I think he was a major, if I remember correctly. So he fights in the Boer War. Then he stumbles across this leg spin thing, becomes a test player, as you say, explodes with bat and with ball, all these things. Then he goes off into World War I and almost dies. I can't remember what it was he got, but it was very, very bad. And it affected him. And he, as you said, he was this incredibly attractive man, this incredible physical specimen, proper South African guy, broad shoulders, brilliantly athletic, could do everything. And he comes back from World War I and he just isn't that guy anymore, right? And so he goes off to play professionally in England, but not in county cricket, but for Julian Khan, the or he'd be a billionaire by today's standards, wouldn't he? The billionaire owner who plays cricket games in his backyard. And he becomes this incredible coach, right? And,
Yes, I think
really does.
Even after coming the World War as well.
He played one test in 1924. Does that sound right?
After 1920.
Yeah, so that
only one game.
Yeah, and he didn't want to play in that, did he? He was almost forced back in. They really had a poor team, South Africa. They were on tour, and if I remember correctly, there were two guys who were just in England. They just picked, and it was because of how much they were struggling on that tour. And he didn't do very well. His bowling was kind of finished by that stage. As I said, he was so sick during World War I that he almost didn't survive, and he was old now by this stage as well. His batting was fine. You can see the footage of him batting in that test match. It's okay, but I doubt he batted like that before World War I. I think he would have been a lot more athletic, and he was always a careful player. And then he plays. There's a great story of him playing against the Australians in, is it 1928 or 29, when he's 40, and he hasn't played any top level cricket for years. He comes out and he just smashes 100 against them. And not only that, in that game he bowled quite good leg spin. And he's so broken as a man by that stage that he's really emotional, and he didn't want to play because he didn't want people to think that, he didn't want people to remember him as that Aubrey Faulkner. And in the end, the Australians talked about that innings for years, and also the wrong end. I think it was one of the famous Australian players was beaten by his wrong end and said, "I don't know who you are, sir, but that's the best wrong end I faced." And this is like, in the 1920s, everyone's already up, right? Like, it's not like when
Couldn't take it them. I mean, he became a very popular coach, but obviously he didn't take to money. One guy became a very good cricketer, I guess. I just couldn't recollect his name.
Yeah, so he coached heaps of great players, but I'd say that I suppose Ian Peebles is his big success. Yeah, so Ian Peebles is a Scottish guy who comes down, and they like share a sandwich together or something, like, which just tells you how little money Aubrey Faulkner had at the time. And he kind of offers him the job. And Ian Peebles, honestly, I think a lot of what we know about Aubrey Faulkner, the man specifically, comes from Ian Peebles, because by that stage, South Africa had kind of moved on from him as well. It's a sad state of affairs, but South Africa don't honor their original cricketers, and I understand why politically, but it's a silly thing. And this is a man who was very important for South African cricket. Like, he's such a good cricketer. He's the difference between them not being competitive and maybe not even ending up with the ICC and the test status and everything else. He was that good that he changes the trajectory of their cricket. And Ian Peebles is not as good a cricketer as Aubrey Faulkner, but he's quite a famous cricketer. He was, I suppose these days he would have ended up being a commentator, right? Like, or a TV presenter. And he would do after dinner speaking, and he was very funny, and he lived this extravagant life, and everyone knew who Ian Peebles was. And he was quite a flippant person, a Kerry O'Keefe type character, right? Sort of a Bumble type character. But through that, it actually meant that he could keep talking about Aubrey Faulkner when no one else was. And, he's very close to the widow after. And, the thing about Aubrey Faulkner is he was a very principled person. And he really believed in these things. And he did love teaching people. He would teach people for free, which obviously is such a noble thing to do. But unfortunately, people just took advantage of him again and again. And because he was anti-alcohol, he didn't have a bar at his cricket training thing. And if he had a bar there, he probably would have made enough money to do that. And in the end, he takes his own life in the airing room. He gassed himself in the airing room where they had all the bats around him. And I I think he thought of himself as a failure when he died. Like it's hard to read between the lines, and sadly, everyone who knew him was passed away by the time I'd written about him. But you get the feeling he just thought he'd failed, and so there was nothing left to do other than to take his own life. And his life is nothing but success. And it's a real shame that he thought that the money was the thing that defined him, whereas actually, I think his legacy in cricket is just incredible as a player, as a coach, as a figure. The fact that South Africa is successful today, he's a really, really important person in the history of our game. And unfortunately, when someone takes their own life, and he was quite young, what was he, about 40, 45, when he took his own life, he was famous enough in his period. I think, he interviewed Jack Hobbs. Like, the fact that they were using Aubrey Faulkner to interview Jack Hobbs, I think tells you that during that period, he was still very well known and very well respected. But afterwards, he kind of, his legacy dies off a little bit. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that people didn't know how to talk about suicide in those days. They didn't know how to talk about someone taking their own life. South Africa gets kicked out of the game, right? So we don't talk about a lot of the early South African cricketers as much as we should. But this is a man who was he has a great life story, even if he didn't play cricket, because some of the things he was involved with are incredible. He is a great cricketer and a great all-rounder and greatly important to South Africa. He's also one of the most important cricket coaches of all time. And he's a very, very important person to the game as it is today. And, I know that your project is really to talk about you said underrated, but it's not the underrated. I think you and I have an affinity for the players who didn't get their due. Right. And it's not Aubrey Faulkner's fault. If Aubrey Faulkner had played for England or Australia, we'd still be talking about him today. Right. He played for the wrong country at the wrong time. Right. Right. And it didn't work particularly well from that point of view. But he has played a part in what the sport of cricket is today. Right. The wrong-uns, the all-rounders, improving himself, coaching himself, learning how to do that, coaching others and everything else. He's a truly important player in the history of cricket. And that's why I wrote a big piece on him. It wasn't, you can imagine, when I went to Crick Info and said, I'm writing this piece on Aubrey Faulkner, they were like, oh, okay. And when I came back to them with 10,000 words on Aubrey Faulkner, they were like, oh my God. And then they read it and they were like, we get it. Right. But you couldn't sell that. I could tell you one of the early projects I wanted to do, and I still might do it one day, is that all four of those early leg spinners lived incredible lives, right? And they are really, really important to South African cricket and to world cricket.
How fascinating, how ironic that South Africa, in a way, gave birth to this Boogly and all. And then it's exactly vanished from there.
Yeah. And also, at one stage, these guys were all playing domestic cricket together. We talk about great teams from Barbados and, New South Wales and stuff, right? That West Transvaal team might be one of the greatest first-class teams of all time because they had four bowlers that no one could pick and they could all bat. So that was the thing. South Africa, we talk about all-rounders in South Africa now. Percy Shorwell bats at 11 in that first test match they bat, and he's a proper batter. They just couldn't fit him into the order any early on, right? They had so many people who could bat in that side. So, I really wanted to write that book because I think it tells you a lot about early cricket. You can tell the story of the formation of the ICC. You can tell the story. I mean, it's one of the more ridiculous things in cricket history that South Africa is playing against England and Australia. They briefly stop playing them so they can have the fucking ball war, right? And then they just go back to playing them again straight afterwards. There are so many incredible things in that story that Aubrey Faulkner and Gordon White and Reggie Swartz and I forgot the other guy's name, but all those guys were involved in, right? They are so important to the history of cricket and everything else. And, one of the reasons I want to write cricket books is that I love telling stories, but I'd love to get to the point of where I'm famous enough I can pull that off and I can do that book correctly, because I do think it's a really important one for the future of the game. Those who ignore history go on to make its mistakes. And cricket is a perfect example of doing that again and again. These people were incredibly important to our game, and they lived fascinating. Bert Vogler, I forgot the other one. They lived fascinating lives. They all had very, very different. I think only one of them lived into his old age. There was an alcoholic amongst them. As I said, Gordon White was the great leg spinner who only ever took 2 test wickets, right? Like they really did live a fascinating life, these guys. And I think through your project, we should be able to talk about these great older players more.
That would be very great. So I'm expecting that you are willing to do more such episodes, right?
Oh, I mean, every couple of months, if you need me to come back on, I'm trying to think of some of the old cricketers that I have, fascinations with. I mean, Aubrey Faulkner is the one that I'm most tied to, right? But, there's fascinating players in associate cricket as well. There's fascinating older women's players that we don't talk about. It's someone like Faith Evans is a really famous one, right? In Australia, we never had Indigenous male players, but we had an Indigenous female player. And, there are these great important players throughout the history of our game. And if we don't tell their stories, who does? And, the way I look at it is we're about to lose a whole generation of cricketers from the 50. We've probably lost a lot from the 50s already. We're going to lose the players from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? People like us have to tell their stories, because if we don't, the Aubrey Faulkner one was almost impossible to tell because of how many fragments there were.
Another step is article, I think, on Asif Karim, Master of Mombasa. And in that, I have personally talked with him, Asif Karim, so many times. He came to India as then, and that guy was doing his best to preserve the legacy.
So that's a perfect. I did those pieces very close to each other, right? And it was when the Cricket Monthly was at its height, and you could just say, "I'm going to go up and write an 8,000 word piece on Sean Tate, and I'll come back and trust me." And they did, and they were great editors, and it was fully backed, and it was great. And obviously, it's not that anymore. And I don't want to have a go at people who write it now, but it's just not that anymore, right? That was the Cricket Monthly is the height of cricket writing, because the best cricket writers in the world were encouraged to play their best shots, right? And we probably never had so much great cricket writing from one place at a short period of time. And so, the Aubrey Faulkner one worked, and I went back, and I always wanted to write about Asif Karim, and somehow I got in touch with him. And so I talked to him briefly, and I remember calling Usman Samiuddin. I don't even know if the Aubrey Faulkner one had come out at this point, right? But I'd been working on the Aubrey one for ages. And I said, you're gonna have no idea about this, but do you remember Asif Karim? And he's like, yeah, I said, this guy has kept every single scrap of information on his entire career. And I don't think anyone knows how fascinating this guy is. Yeah.
Imagine they have uploaded in 5 languages. People,
He's so, and he's so passionate about this. And, I loved writing about his family, right? Because he had so much information on his family as well, but also his tennis career, right? And all these different things. And so most cricketers are not like that, sadly. And sometimes you get a good family member who can give you all the stuff. And, there's a great writer called Jeff Pearlman who does lots of great stories. And he goes to the mums and the aunties and the grandmothers and all that, right? And again, in cricket, we don't do that enough, right? We don't do the very basics. And in Asif Karim's case, you don't have to do that. But, there's a project that I'm working on, hopefully in the next little while, where that's what I want to do. Right, I want to go back and find the people who went to school with this player.
What I would say, broadcasting or journalism, that even though we are equipped with every possible thing, still we are just wanted to focus on few selected stars. I'm not sure for TRP or what.
Very good. And it's always the case. I mean, when I wrote the book Test Cricket, that was one of the reasons I really wanted to write it. Is I was like, there can't just be the same 25 great players. It had to be these other players, and they all play a part in the overall sport. And, if you haven't read Art of Batting yet, but if you read Art of Batting, you realize that there's a lot of batters that I mentioned in it that are not considered great. And so Navjot Sidhu is in it, right? Roy Fredericks is in it. I want to talk about, Brown is in it, right? These are really important players.
Yeah.
Bill Brown is in it. Yeah. These are really important players for cricket. And I think they're all great at their individual skills. They might not have been great all-round batters, but they're great in individual skills, and they still play a part in what Test batting becomes, right? And so you have to tell this story. And, I know that you're brilliant at what you do, but I think you can expand it further. If I was you, I'd be looking at trying to don't just get experts like me on, try and get the people who played cricket with some of these guys who are forgotten, right? Like, try and get their teammates because, especially the guys from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I've been lucky enough recently to get Lance Gibbs's number, and I'm going to try and get hold of Lance Gibbs. And, if I do the bowling book, I want to talk to Lance Gibbs. Lance Gibbs is an old bowler. There aren't that many old bowlers left, right? Like, if we don't take our time, I can tell you two of the biggest regrets I had in my life is I always thought that Andrew Simons was better than he was, and Australia misused him. And I'd met him a couple of times, but I'd never sat down and talked to him about it, right? And the other one I had was I had Terry Jenner's phone number, and I didn't contact him, and I was like, I'll do that later, and I'll do that later. And then Terry Jenner died, right? And so we have to, us historians, people who want to tell cricket story, have to be those because it's not going to get done.
That also given address Terry Jenner. I said this story more or less on surface level everybody knew, but there are many such players who nobody even know.
Yeah. No, exactly. But even when you say they knew them, I mean, I know that Jonathan Wilson's written a great piece about Lance Gibbs. I don't know if Lance Gibbs' entire career is told correctly, right? Like, I'm not saying I'm going to be able to do it in the book, but I don't know if it's told completely correctly, right? And there are, Trevor Goddard is a perfect example of a very important cricketer who plays for 15 years and is absolutely ridiculous. But I'm not sure that we know everything we needed to know about Trevor Goddard either. And that's why I think, us as storytellers, it's very important to do this. And, young cricket writers contact me every day going, how I get into the business. I was like, a lot of people just want to know about the older players. They just want to know about the story. You could start a YouTube channel now where all you did was interview players who played in the 80s, right? And it would be fascinating, and it would be great, and it would be interesting, and it would teach you how to be good on that sort of stuff as well. So, I just think there's so many great stories to be told in our sport that haven't been told yet, and so many stories that have been told that could be told a lot better.
Yeah, so I have my YouTube channel. I am not sure whether you have gone through or not, but since I'm posting there on mainly, okay, I will tell you the day I started my YouTube channel, my first and foremost goal was that I wanted to be a desi Jarrod Kimber for Indian audience. So, but see, honestly, in India, the very dearth of quality content for cricket in Hindi language. In Hindi.
Yeah, in Hindi.
So, I mean, people can read some quality content on Twitter or Quick Info and scroll through YouTube, but in Hindi, still it's very, how I could explain. I mean, it's a kind of commercial movies kind of content. Nobody is giving damn about the quality. So that was my main so started uploading few videos. Still, I'm also very newbie. Like my scale of experience, if you are Dilshad Doors, I am Abu Survanshi. So I don't know nothing about editing at all. So yeah, slowly I'm learning, and by this will the first episode I will publish about this project, and then see how it goes.
No, look, I think that's a great way of starting. Look, we've tried to start up networks in other languages ourselves because we know that other languages are not being served. The English reading language or the English viewing language is being really served with top quality content from many different creators. A lot of other languages in cricket are just not getting that, right? And so, and I've met a lot of these writers. I know that there are great writers in Bangladesh and in Sri Lanka and in India and Pakistan that are writing in their local language, but they're not even allowed to write about cricket the way that they should, because it's like, no, you write about cricket in Urdu, like in this style. It's like, no.
I got very, and I think I asked you also a few months back about some kind of the similar kind of thing with you, if it's possible to work with you. So you said that no, it's you are also going with some kind of crunch situation and all. Yeah. But
It's not been a deal.
In India, I won't name those websites I published. They approached me. They liked my Twitter threads and all, but ironic thing, they liked my articles about such kind of players, like unheard players, but they wanted me to write about these clickbait stuff, like why Rohit and Pandya are fighting with each other. I don't know what it is. I cannot.
Yeah, and that is the problem, right? It's cricket's biggest problem at the moment, which is that the in cricket media, the job that is most readily available is a cricket content writer, is what they call it. And it's basically just an aggregator, right? Going, oh, Michael Bourne did this on Twitter. And it's absolute nonsense. And it is absolute nonsense. And the truth is, it doesn't work for these sites because eventually they just all cannibalize from each other, right? And the people who really work are the websites who are actually putting up original content and interesting content. But if you're looking for sponsorship, people are gonna go to the other things first because it has higher hits. So it's a catch-22 the way that it all works at the moment.
Feels me, and that when I go through your posts and all or your videos, at least YouTube still you are managing some decent traction, but personally still the content you provide still it's nothing. The traction you got, do you think? And if I compare to some other mainstream guys, we just mentioned news aggregators, they got 10x more traction just for one line or two lines. So this is the hard reality we are living in. And
look, I think, the truth is that at the moment, those places that get 10x are getting funded. But in the future, we will realize that actually people click on those websites for a second and then click off them, right? So if you want to have a career in this, it's actually, and I've always said this, I've tried to stay away from viral things, right? Not that I haven't had viral hits and everything else.
I'm anti-viral.
Yeah. And it's not that I'm even anti-viral in my case. It's that if you chase viral things, you don't actually try and make good content, right? And second of all, if you chase viral things, you're not doing the work anymore, right? You're just trying to find the zeitgeisty moment. And eventually people realize that there's nothing there, right? So if you look at me, when I left Cricinfo, I had enough hardcore fans on Twitter, right? They weren't just people who followed me because I put in ridiculous tweets. They were people who were literally following me because I had given them lots of content over a long period of time, which meant they followed me to YouTube, to Patreon, to Substack, to my podcast, and everywhere else, right? And that's what companies don't understand at the moment. They think that if my channel has 300,000 subscribers and a cricket aggregator has 300,000 subscribers, those are similar. They're not similar. And that's the thing that will flip in the future, because the ability to build audiences, right, is very different than the ability to get hits. And, we have seen, you and I have both seen cricket websites go very, very well because they're very good at SEO for a little while. No one actually goes to that website though, right? It's just people Googling whatever term it is and ending up at that website. And so that's the big difference going ahead. And you just have to, that's how you have to be, right? Like, you have to try and source the best stories and tell them the best way you can.
Okay, then I think we have covered a lot of stuff. Yeah. So all the viewers, I think it is available on Amazon and anywhere else.
It's available in some other stores in India, I think, as well. But Amazon's obviously the one that I'm aware of. And some other people have told me they've bought it on some other sites, so it's available. As I said, the digital copy and the audio copy are both available on Amazon, and one of the hard copy or the soft copy is also available. But you can pre-order now. That's what
maybe due to my locality about also 8th July it will be available. But I'll check again.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be available at one stage in the next couple of weeks. But you can pre-order or you can find it on some of those other ones.
Definitely it will be out of stock as well.
I'm hoping. I'm hoping. I've had so many people from India ask me about it. So
one thing I can assure you, the most of the stock is going to happen in India only.
Yeah, I mean, it's sold quite a lot of copies in England, to be fair, so far. I would assume it would sell the best in India. The India and English markets are very different. Look, I want to be able to tell cricket stories. I have to have one book that sells a lot of copies. At the moment, this looks like it's going to be the one that changes my career so that I can then tell the stories that I want to tell going ahead.
So all the best again for book India. And I'm certain that it will do phenomenal business, just like you're doing on YouTube and everywhere.